So we appreciate Senator Schaefer for coming on. Nancy, it's good to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's good to be on. I appreciate all you're doing.
Just how unconstitutional and Kafkaesque the CPS is.
Right. Well, it is unconstitutional, and I'm sure you have many listeners that know that children are being taken away from their parents in a ruthless kind of behavior by caseworkers and social workers and investigators, and the bureaucracy is very huge. That also includes lawyers and judges and therapists and others who take these children from their parents without a cause. And of course, we know that money is being made because of this, and I'm convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, that the parents across this country need to be warned of the dangers. The Department of Child Protective Services has become a protected empire that we see going on around us, and it's built on taking children and separating families. This is not to say today that there are not those children who are really being abused, who need to be removed from the wretched situations that they may be in.
But it needs to be done through due process.
Yes, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the families that are having children removed from them with no cause, and then there is no due process available to them after this has happened. And in one county in my district, I had 37 families brought together one Saturday morning in the library to allow them to, without any press and without any Child Protective Services pressure there, to tell their stories. And it was absolutely unbelievable to hear these parents, single dads, single mothers, telling and other parents telling their stories of how their children had been picked up in the middle of the night, off of the school buses, out of schools, out of hospitals, even while they are nursing, and these families had never seen those children again. You have never seen such agony, such suffering, and such crying. And we had 50 families standing outside the door that were not allowed to come in because we already had 37 families inside. It was truly just seeing the work of the Gestapo coming against these families and taking their children from them, never to be seen again. It was very, very enlightening, that day was, when we saw what was happening in this one Child Protective Services department in one county in my district in Georgia. And not only that, but they had a separate business going on where they required all of these parents to come in multiple times and have drug tests. And they charged the parents every time, so they had a separate business going on. They had already made over $100,000 in this business.
Senator, so when did you begin to discover these horrors, and what has your fight been like? Well,
it has been horrible. It really has. And let me just say up front here now that my writing the corrupt business of Child Protective Services, which you probably have read at some point or another, that prompted me, of course, to give the speech at Eagle Forum for the conference. I lost my Senate seat over this. And let me say that there are causes worth losing over, so it hasn't distressed me that much. It's just given me more time to work on this issue and other issues. But in calling around the country to other state representatives and senators, asking them would they help this family or that family that have been contacting me, they have told me that if they help, if they do anything, they will lose their job. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, it's a mafia.
And, of course, it cost me my Senate seat. But that's okay. That's okay. We're moving forward. We're exposing what is being done. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about the judges and the money. I wanted to share with you that the Census Bureau has reported that in 2002, $40 billion in transfer payments were made between households. That money is under the direction and the control of family court judges.
And that's only the tip of the iceberg. Of course,
that's right.
You break this down so well, but there's bounties on children's heads.
Yes, there are. As a matter of fact, we just learned a few days ago that an order had even been placed to one of our Child Protective Services departments for a particular kind of child that they wanted. So there is a bounty on these children. As a matter of fact, when you break it down as to exactly what is happening to promote these financial incentives, you have to go back to the Adoption and the Safe Families Act that was set in motion in 1974 by Walter Mondale, and then later was expanded upon by President Bill Clinton in 1997. And what this act did is it offered cash bonuses to the states for every child they adopted out of foster care. So in order to receive the adoption incentive bonuses, local Child Protective Services need more children. They must have merchandise, which is the children, that sells. And you must have plenty so that the buyer can choose. Some counties are known to give $4,000 to $6,000 bonus for each child adopted out to strangers, and an additional $2,000 for special needs children. And of course, this money just continues to follow the child for years and years and years. And the employees work to keep those federal dollars flowing.
And that's why 67% of children nationally, and that happens to be the average in Texas as well, we have the state hearings on this, are on multiple psychotropic drugs because once they give them a designation, then the cash amount goes way up.
That's right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. There's a baseline number. There's a baseline number that of expected adoptions based on population for each state. For every child that DHR or Child Protective Services or whatever it's called in your particular state can get adopted, there's this bonus of $4,000 to $6,000.
Tell us about the bounties on people's children.
Certainly, these children come with bounties because we know that the incentives are available there. The federal incentives are available, and they can be $4,000 or $6,000. But actually, there is a beginning formula in which each bonus is multiplied. And this sounds complicated. It really isn't, but this is what the states go by. Each bonus is multiplied by the percentage that the state has managed to exceed its baseline adoption number. Therefore, the states and local communities work hard to reach their goals for increased numbers of adoptions for children in foster care. So, therefore, you get to the end of the year and a Child Protective Services department in some state or in a county there in the state may not have taken as many children as they need to, and they have their formula or their bonus increases on the wall, and it tells exactly how many more children they need by the end of the year.
So it's just like a sales shop at a car dealership. They got the sales manager, and you're not going to reach your goal, Bob.
That's exactly right.
The forms aren't just lies. They're so lazy and so criminal, they don't even care. They just use old forms and on. Have you ever seen that, Senator?
I do know that they take children right out of the hospitals, and sometimes they're 1 or 2 days old. But the caseworkers and social workers oftentimes, very often, are guilty of fraud, and they do withhold the evidence, and they fabricate the evidence. And their whole goal is to terminate the parental right of the parents. And parents are just left at the mercy. And all of this in the best interest of the child, those words, in the best interest of the child, have been redefined. It's not in the best interest of the child. The bottom line is taking the children for money.
And the law was written, for those that don't know, I'd like you to speak to this because I know you're an expert on it, so you can speak to it. It was written to where, we're supposed to keep the family together and give it to grandparents or the other spouse. They advertise on TV to tattle. The grandparents go and tattle, and then they don't get the children 9 times out of 10. Yes.
There are lots of grandparents that cannot get their grandchildren, even when it would be best if say the parents are on drugs. Someone does need to have access to those children, but oftentimes the grandparents are turned down. Now, there is a policy that you're supposed to secure a relative immediately for those parents, but oftentimes that relative is never sought out. The grandparents are never given the children. And a stranger then comes in and takes over the lives of those children.
And ma'am,
and there is absolutely no financial resource or no real drive to unite the family back together or to keep them together or to provide any effective care for the family. That is completely gone. Now it's destroying the family.
Foster parents being 5 times more likely to abuse children than any other group.
You're exactly right. The children are much more likely to be abused in foster care than at home with their own parents. The beginning of this journey for me began with a grandmother who was trying to get her 2 granddaughters in one of the counties in my district. The Child Protective Services had removed the 2 little girls from their mother, who was very young, and they based it on the fact that there was an unopened can of beer in the front of her car. They took these 2 little girls over to an adjoining county, put them in foster home over there where they had 18 children, all kinds of little rooms downstairs in the lower level of this home. And one of the caseworkers in that county was a pedophile.
Of course.
Who lived in that home and regularly sexually molested the children who were in the foster care.
Ugh.
When this came up in court, I went to court with this grandmother and sat in the back of the courtroom. And we had a good attorney that day who pulled the walls down, who cross-examined one of the older children in this foster home, and she admitted that there was an inappropriate relationship between the foster mother and the caseworker. And then it got a little worse, and then the juvenile court judge got all nervous and said, "Counsel, meet me in my chambers," and they went out and stayed 5 minutes and came back, and our attorney just looked at us and out loud said, "It's nothing but legal kidnapping." That's all it is, legal kidnapping. But let me tell you what happened. It's called DFACS in Georgia, and we pressed and pressed and pressed. The judge said those children will be removed within a week. Well, a week was gone, 10 days was gone, the children were still there. We kept leaning on them to get those children out of there. And out of the blue, someone called this grandmother in Florida to tell her that they were bringing the children from Georgia to the state line. Would she drive up to pick them up? She, of course, said she would be there. She got the children. They didn't have any clothes. One was not wearing shoes. Mm-hmm. She took them home, and within 3 days, that juvenile court judge drew up a new order, and she gave the 2 little girls to their father, who lived on the West Coast, who had never been involved in their lives, and who was involved in adult entertainment. Well,
it's better than that in that death pit down there in that house with all those little kids. Now,
right.
When you get down to it, you got a couple groups. You got parents that were, you've got children who were abused, who think that all parents are abusive and they're gonna punish the family. So there's those mentally ill people. Then there's pedophiles who want access to kids, and then there's scumbags that just want money. And I got to say, that's basically what makes up CPS in my experience. And I think, from what I've seen, I'd probably say 30% of them are pedophiles. And and the problem is this crime rate, this crime spree is growing.
Yes, it is.
So can you comment on that? And where is this going? How do we stop them?
Well, I would say that there are definitely pedophiles in the system. There's no question about that, because we know where there's children, there are pedophiles. They're in schools and they're in churches and they're everywhere where they can get their hands on children. So we know that that's true. And it's got to be brought to an end. It's got to be completely exposed for what it is. And in my opinion, it needs to completely be dissolved. I don't see any good left in Child Protective Services. As far as picking up a child that's being totally abused, the police could do that just as well as Child Protective Services.
And then you have due process. The incredible thing is, the worse they get, the more money and power they get.
It appears that way. It appears that way. But all of it is based on money, and that's where it's going to have to be cut off. The federal incentives have got to be cut off and be removed on a federal level in order to get this stopped.
And that's where we go now in the closing minutes we have left in this interview, Senator. And again, we can only commend you and pray for you in this fight and then politically going after you. Specific orders for specific children that look a specific way. I mean, you've now saying you've discovered that.
Right. We have discovered that. We haven't discovered it in every state, but we've discovered it in many states, and we have so many families calling that are absolutely delirious. They are so desperate. They do not know where to turn, and actually they have no place to turn for help. And of course, parents, the poorer the families are, those are the ones who are targeted because they don't have the wherewithal to fight the system or hire an attorney. And they are just caught up in it, and many of them are because their children are blue-eyed or blonde or exactly what someone wants, and those families are targeted. So it is just heartbreaking as to what is going on and what we've got to do in order to bring this to an end.
Have you ever heard about what the former head FBI agent in Southern California discovered about the CPS, even in the 80s? They have public auctions, closed auctions in Las Vegas with the kids on the block. These people.
Well,
man.
you know, we have some states now that put the children on the internet, and you can just go through their pictures and choose the one you want.
See how pure evil's just right out in the open now, like it's no big deal.
And then there are some children that even if you might like to, if a really good person who is really trying to help a child will choose that child, oftentimes then they refuse to let these parents have the child. So if your motives are pure as the driven snow, and you're trying to really help get a child out of that system and give them a new life, oftentimes they won't let the child go.
No, they want client houses where they warehouse the kids, a lot of times locked up, and they've ruled, they can legally lock them up and stuff in these little cages. They only want client foster parents that want to run the money in and put them on drugs because that's shared with the local CPS.
Right. It's just, it is one of the most corrupt situations that we could ever have in this country.
This rivals the Nazis. By the way, the Nazis had CPS. That's how they started grabbing people's kids. The year Hitler was elected in 1933, he was a eugenicist.